Insanity. Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Red Bull seem to be the masters of displaying how insane they are then. Did they not learn from when they put an inexperienced Pierre Gasly to partner Max Verstappen all the way back in 2019? He understandably struggles to perform, but isn't given ample time to get accustomed to the car and the environment. So they throw in an even more inexperienced driver who initially is doing quite well. But slowly by slowly, things get worse and worse, to the point where Alex Albon's confidence is so beaten, he can't focus on making things better since there's constant chat about his seat being up for grabs. Other options come up on the radar and Red Bull go after the shiniest object they can find. Sergio Perez in 2020 was one of the best drivers on the grid, so signing him for 2021 was one of the only moves that made logical sense. But as we know, he eventually found himself in the same position as his two predecessors, to the point where he just went out sad. Again, further options were considered, but for some reason, they decided to make the exact same mistake they made 6 years ago. Now, like a lot of people, I've been making fun of Lawson's absolutely abysmal start to 2025. But realistically, I wouldn't wish to be in that position myself if I were an F1 driver. Nor would I want that for any up-and-coming talent or someone who is comfortable in their current surroundings. Since Ricciardo left in 2018, no other driver has been able to get remotely close to Max Verstappen. That is, of course, a testament to Daniel being more talented and experienced than all the drivers that have come after him. But also, over the years, the team has become more and more Verstappen-oriented. If you ask me personally, I think Red Bull's best bet last year when they were debating who would replace Checo was to go with a trusted hand. I mean, why bother bringing Ricciardo back, putting him in the VCARB where he produced some stunning drives, just to not give him another shot in the Red Bull? And if they had learned from seasons in the past, they'd have known that promoting inexperienced drivers is not the way to go. As much as I didn't think Liam was the right choice for that seat, he didn't do anything wrong in accepting the offer. But quite frankly, I don't think there's anyone really who would do well in that second car. Because, let's say this, you put Tsunoda in the car for Japan, right? He's obviously not accustomed to the car, and consequently, there might be a similar gap between him and Max as there currently is for Lawson. So what do you do in that scenario? Clearly, Yuki isn't a bad driver. We've seen what he's been able to do in the Toro Rosso, AlphaTauri, VCARB, whatever. Without them ruining his races through strategy, Tsunoda could be sitting as high as P5 in the championship right now. That's how incredible he's been, but those strategists just have to mess everything up. That's a car he gels very well with, and as a result, he can extract the most out of it. But we've got so much evidence now that the Red Bull isn't just plug and play. You can't just drop a driver into that second seat and expect them to perform from the get-go, because it doesn't work like that. So having this never-ending production line of drivers coming in and out so frequently is damaging to their careers. For people like Gasly and Albon, luckily there were other teams willing to give them another chance. And ever since leaving that environment and driving a car that's not centered around one driver with a very unique driving style, they've only thrived. I saw someone who made a comment that said, driving the Red Bull is like giving a right-handed person a left-handed guitar to play. And honestly, I thought that was a pretty good analogy. Every driver they have chosen since Ricciardo has been a mismatch for that Red Bull and hasn't been able to deal with its extremities like Max can. Because that dude is a generational talent. He can adapt to a lot and perform well in many different circumstances, but obviously still has preferences that he likes to really maximize. So as he's getting better and better, the second driver is regressing further and further in comparison. But they've been put in this situation where they're trying to learn how to drive the car, which is very difficult to manage. There's always this never-ending debate as to whether or not the car is designed around Max. To start with, he naturally has an advantage over any driver that joins the team at this stage since he's been there since 2016. He knows that team inside and out, and his feedback on what he wants out of the car is what drives part of the team's development. I mean, Christian Horner said it himself.
Yeah, Max is quite specific what he wants from a car to make it fast, and that is generally a very positive front end on the car, a very sharp turn in. Of course, the consequence of that is it will unsettle the rear of the car, and that for a driver is tremendously confidence sapping if you've got a loose rear end on these cars on entry into corners, and so that's where he excels. That's where he's able to live on a nice edge of adhesion, and he's just constantly asking for more and more front out of the car, and of course that you're always going to follow the direction of your faster driver, and that leads the organisation in terms of its development.
Of course, other factors are taken into account, such as handling, drivability, balance, downforce, etc. Whatever makes the car as fast as possible. But in terms of its fundamental characteristics, the team will design it to suit what Verstappen wants. And I don't think that should be controversial to say, since Max is the only one that has proved he can tame the beast. So their best bet at winning championships is to go all in on him. If he were to ever step away from Red Bull, another team would have a car that requires a different driving style to get the most out of. One that's maybe not as extreme as what Max prefers to extract as much lap time as possible. So it's pointless debating what he'd do in this car versus the Red Bull because ultimately he's not going anywhere. At the end of the day, he's been the constant in that team. Other drivers have come and gone, but he has remained the benchmark all this time. It's understandable why they would prioritize his needs. but the extent to which Red Bull do so comes at a detriment to the second driver. I mean, why even bother running another car if they're just destined to finish outside the points? In order to have two drivers consistently fighting at the front, it seems like you need two Verstappens, which is impossible unless someone figures out a way to clone human beings. After only 2 races, Red Bull are already reconsidering their choice. Despite having only raced in 2 Grand Prix and a sprint race, Liam's position is already under threat. If they really wanted to get the most out of him, then they should have given him sufficient running in Red Bull machinery in the lead up to 2025. Instead, they rushed him in at the last second over Tsunoda because of politics. And now, it all looks pretty embarrassing for both driver and team. Lawson's antics when he was brought in for the last 6 races of 2024 definitely didn't put him in good stead with certain fan bases. The main incident I'm referring to is Mexico, where he gave Checo the finger. Like, that was just so unnecessary. But the rest of the stuff he gets hate for, I'm not gonna lie, that's on Red Bull. Starting with how they dealt with the Ricciardo situation. They never confirmed nor denied to the media whether Singapore would be Daniel's last race in Formula 1. It was kind of just assumed that it would be based on paddock talk. And thinking about it, if they treated one of F1's most popular drivers like that, then what does that say about Red Bull as an organization? Specifically Marco. Ricciardo was a character that was so loved in the paddock and delivered many stunning drives for the team. That was just plain nasty, but Marco thinks of these drivers as pieces on a chessboard that can just be used and tossed at any moment. I guess that's also part of the cutthroat nature of Formula 1, but especially with Ricciardo, he just didn't deserve to be treated like that, and it directed a lot of resentment Liam's way. I doubt Helmut is aware of that, nor do I think he cares, but that's part of the problem. It's almost like they've unintentionally set him up for failure with very brash decision making. And don't forget, there was a time Daniel was actually very close to being the one replacing Checo mid-season, but for one reason or another, they decided against it. Whether it was Checo's Mexico backing or something else, in my opinion, they fumbled the bag. At the time, I thought the most reasonable decision would have been to put Ricciardo in the Red Bull, since he's the only driver to date who has proved he can handle a nervous car to the degree that Verstappen prefers. Even if he's lost a couple of tenths since 2018, it would have been better than any of the choices they currently have available to them. Because none of these drivers in the junior team, or any other team for that matter, had a strong track record in a Red Bull. Only Daniel did. He was fully ready to take on that challenge, and despite struggling in the McLaren that he found very difficult to drive, even to the point where his driving style changed so much it was almost unrecognizable, maybe we could have seen Ricciardo 2.0 return in the Red Bull again. To me, how a driver performs in another car shouldn't have mattered so much in Red Bull's assessment of who to put in the second seat, because it's clear, the problem has always been about driver car dynamics more than anything else. It's no coincidence that drivers like Albon and Gasly were both solid before Red Bull, then struggled at Red Bull, but have now thrived without them anyway. Meaning, the problem wasn't them, it's that second seat. Checo before Red Bull was the king of the midfield, and I know that title sounds kinda corny, but he was genuinely top tier, especially during his years with Racing Point. 2021, he wasn't too bad. 2022, he started out well, but fell off as the car's development started getting further and further away from him. 2023 was a similar story, only an even worse drop-off, and same again in 2024. And by that point, his reputation was so badly tarnished that no other team wanted him, and I guess age also played a factor as well. But I can guarantee that if he was given a chance at another team, he would have found his form again like Pierre and Alex. It's not like Liam isn't talented. During those stand-in races he did in 2023 and 2024, he was very close to Tsunoda. Not beating him, but still surprisingly competitive despite having way less experience. However, history has repeated itself once again, and if he is to be dropped this early on in the season, or at any point in the future, I'm pretty certain he would start performing way better. I don't know, let me know down in the comments whether you think Ricciardo was the correct choice in hindsight, because to me, it so obviously was. Last year would have been the perfect opportunity to reunite him and Max on the same team again, without things exploding like time to time, like before. With both drivers being veterans, they would have had at least one extremely competitive driver and one relatively competitive driver. Instead, they now have a liability, lurking at the back of the grid. Had Daniel been given a chance, then they could have stuck Lawson in the VCARB alongside Tsunoda and had them scrap it out amongst themselves for a full season or two. That way, Liam gets to develop in a more comfortable environment and build up a strong reputation in Formula 1. And being in a low-profile team with Yuki Tsunoda as a teammate is very different to having prime Max Verstappen. Think about what he has to deal with now. Coming into 2025 with only 11 races worth of experience, and being expected to jump into one of the most difficult cars to drive at one of the most successful teams in the sport's history, alongside one of the best drivers in the history of the sport. Not only that, he's got the added spotlight from rival teams like Mercedes with Russell and Antonelli, McLaren with Piastri and Norris, and Ferrari with Leclerc and Hamilton. That's like asking someone who's never swam before in their life to swim across the Atlantic and expecting them not to drown. But this is effectively the position Liam has been put in, and I doubt anyone else would be a long-term fix. Max Verstappen really holds all the cards right now because he's carrying the team. If he were to leave, then it would actually be so over, until they change the car's design philosophy to be a bit more neutral. Tsunoda is a very short-term solution, and I say that in air quotes because we have no idea how he'll perform. But it's not like Red Bull would even stay on with him for 2026, since they'll no longer be powered by Honda. But the rumour is currently that they're planning to bring him in, and potentially Colapinto would be loaned out by Briatore to drive for VCARB. Which, if that happens, that would be some insane mismanagement by Red Bull. I'm not sure how credible that rumour is, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. Regardless, this is probably the worst situation Red Bull could have found themselves in. Let's see whether they can figure it out, but judging by the poor decisions they've currently made, I don't have much hope. I hope you all enjoyed. Let me know what you think about this whole Red Bull situation down in the comment section below. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you're new to get my latest videos in the future. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.